Hi, PerspectiveWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Friday, November 6th. A mild morning here in the Mid-Atlantic region, some patchy fog around, and that'll be the general trend over the next several days. Mild weather with late night and early morning patchy fog. The nights are increasingly long this time of the year, and yet the air mass in place is certainly humid enough that it comes close to or even reaches its dew point late at night, and that could result in some late night, early morning fog that will tend to dissipate by the mid to late morning hours, and mostly sunny skies should dominate in the afternoon all along the I-95 corridor for the next several days. Probably the next chance of some decent rain won't be until the middle part of next week for the Mid-Atlantic region. Meanwhile, we have the remains of Ada that we have to monitor over the next several days. It is now emerging back over the Caribbean Sea, which is still quite warm this time of the year, and it looks like it'll turn to the northeast, impact Cuba probably as a tropical storm, and then the Keys of Florida, the southern part of Florida, by the early part of next week. After that, it could spill out over into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, maybe even the central Gulf of Mexico, and ultimately can turn north and impact the northern and northeastern Gulf Coast region. This is the latest forecast track by NOAA's National Hurricane Center. Again, just as a reminder, Ada came ashore northeastern Nicaragua as a very strong hurricane, dumped tremendous amount of rain on Nicaragua, and then Honduras is now just starting to exit as a weakened system. It is only a tropical depression right now. However, it is moving back out over the open waters of the Caribbean Sea. They are typically still warm this time of the year. In this particular circumstance, they're warmer than normal. We'll see the sea surface temperature anomalies in a moment. Turns to the northeast, looks like it goes over Cuba by the latter half of the upcoming weekend, and then could affect the Keys. This is the Keys right here stretching off to the south and west of southern Florida. Probably as tropical storm status, and then could spill out over into the open waters of the eastern Gulf. Ultimately can push up perhaps to the panhandle of Florida during the middle or latter part of next week. So several more days to deal with the remains of Ada. Well, this is the latest sea surface temperature anomaly chart of the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean Sea. Again, Ada came ashore northeastern Nicaragua is a powerful Category 4 hurricane, crossed into Honduras, is now exiting. All this orange is represents slightly above normal sea surface temperatures. So they're typically pretty warm this time of the year. In this case, they're even warmer than normal. Looks like it turns to the northeast, impacts Cuba, and then the Keys of Florida before spilling out over into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. And all of this area is featuring above normal sea surface temperatures, which certainly will be more favorable for potential intensification of the remains of Ada. Again, it looks like tropical storm status when it hits Cuba, and probably tropical storm status while it moves over the Keys. Certainly an outside chance that it makes it all the way back to hurricane status by the time it impacts southern Florida, the Keys of Florida, early next week. Well, one of the key factors in the ultimate movement of the remains of Ada is very strong high-pressure ridging in the upper part of the atmosphere that is now situated right here over the southeastern part of Canada. And this particular pattern here sets a stage for some tropical activity beneath that upper level ridge. You can even see the reflection of it at 500 millibars. What we're looking at are the 500 millibar height anomaly averages for the current 5-day period from last night's 6Z run of the ensemble GFS. When high pressure ridging is centered over southeastern Canada, that allows for tropical activity to kind of cut underneath, moving from the east to the west. And in this particular case, this system will cut across Cuba, across the Keys, and then probably into the eastern or central Gulf of Mexico by the middle part of next week. Again, all possible as a result of the very strong high pressure ridging in the middle part of the atmosphere that will average out in this particular manner for the current 5-day period. It's also contributing to much above normal temperatures for the eastern Great Lakes, the northeast U.S., and the mid-Atlantic region over this current 5-day period. Well, let's now walk through the surface forecast maps from the operational run of the GFS at 6Z last night. High pressure dominating the scene at all levels of the atmosphere as we end the work week and going right through the upcoming weekend. A very mild weekend for D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, and all surrounding suburbs. Temperatures in the afternoon could peak out at 70 or above, well above normal for this time of the year. Meanwhile, farther to the south in the Caribbean Sea, we'll see the remains of Eta here as we progress into the weekend. And the GFS, a little bit different than the Euro model, has perhaps a little bit stronger of a storm. Again, it's an outside chance this returns all the way back to hurricane status by the time it approaches the Keys or early next week. This is the forecast map for early Sunday, crossing over Cuba. And remember, Cuba has some high terrain, so it tends to weaken tropical systems as they move over. So that's kind of good news, a little protection here for the Keys. But once it gets back out over the Florida states, it could intensify a little bit before it gets to the southern part of Florida. And GFS from last night's 6Z run certainly has it intensifying again between Cuba and southern Florida by the time it moves on top of them around Sunday night, Monday time frame. So we'll have to monitor that again. Certainly, if you're in southern half of Florida, you have to monitor this system over the next few days. After that, it looks like it kind of meanders around and then perhaps spills out over into the eastern Gulf of Mexico by the middle part of next week. This is the forecast map for next Wednesday morning. Then a frontal system will also be approaching the eastern seaboard. This very well could kind of get wrapped up into that frontal system during the middle and latter part of next week. This particular model run didn't really show that, but I think I hold that out as a possibility that the remains of Eta could kind of get wrapped up into a frontal system along the eastern seaboard, the middle or latter part of next week. So again, we'll be dealing with Eta, the remains of Eta, over the next several days. It is now back out over the Caribbean Sea. Very well can intensify back to tropical storm status, perhaps even to hurricane status by the time it makes a visit in southern Florida by the early part of next week. We're talking Sunday night, Monday time frame for the Keys of Florida, and all of southern Florida has to monitor this system over the next few days. Meanwhile, farther to the north, mid-Atlantic region, northeast U.S., eastern Great Lakes, very nice weather pattern over the next several days. Mild afternoons, maybe some late night and early morning patchy fog, and we haven't talked about this yet, but the western U.S. has a deep upper level trough in place, colder than normal conditions, and there will be some substantial snow over the coming days in parts of the western U.S., especially the higher elevation areas, Sierra Nevada, eastern California, for example, and the northern Rockies. Places like Montana could get some substantial snow over the next several days. That's it for now. For PerspectiveWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.